Now, our next speaker is David Kelly. Oh, there he is, David, sorry. David's going to be talking about Baital Attraction, uptake of oral vaccine dummy baits by wild badgers.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks.
The first thing I'd like to point out is the important word dummy here. The studies that I've been conducting are only on baits which simulate vaccine baits. They don't contain any vaccine in them, so I have no information about vaccination itself. I'm going to have to explore. Okay, this is a collaborative project with people from a number of different institutions. Some people have already spoken today, and there are people collaborating in the UK as well, a great many of those, and unfortunately I don't have space to give all those names. Why vaccinate against TB? Well, I think people have been covering that question quite well this morning. One of the things that's very obvious from an economic point of view is there's a very big bill associated with TB. The numbers that I have there are ones with associated costs rather than actual direct management of the disease. But you can see those are very large numbers. I've used euros in both cases just to allow an easier comparison. But if that is your bill on a regular basis, then you're hoping you can do something about that. Once cattle movements are managed, once you have all of that aspect under control, then it does appear from the work that James was presenting earlier that the wildlife reservoirs are where you can next make your inroads against that disease. And clearly, if the Irish system is going to bring the whole disease under control by 2030, they still need to make some serious advance on controlling the disease in those reservoirs. So we have two basic options when we come to considering vaccination. You can either inject them, which is a system which has been explained already this morning. That gives you the confidence of being able to handle every animal you vaccinate and therefore be confident that once you have handled it, you know it's vaccinated. And as James was saying earlier, you can even mark those animals in some way so you can see, even if you come across them as a road casualty, that they've been involved in those programs. And there is now a commercial vaccine available. Alternatively, there is an oral vaccination process where you incorporate the vaccine that you want to give to the animals into food, and these are the baits that I'll be talking about, but my baits have no vaccine. The advantage of this technique is when you go out and you present food, you don't have to capture every individual animal. You can present your food at one set, and hopefully that allows access of all animals at those sets to that food. It's a cheaper prospect, but as yet it's unproven in Ireland, and so my presentation here is giving some initial information on how we might go about presenting food to Irish animals. Which is better? A bone of contention perhaps, and maybe as there is more established information from the injectable vaccine camp at the moment, we would suggest that possibly has the advantage. But ultimately, why choose between these techniques? If you have a number of different systems that can work in a number of different habitats, environments, and perhaps offer different targeting of different groups within your population, it's probably advantageous to use all tools in your toolbox. So a quick overview of what I've been doing. I've been working with a protocol which has been developed initially by the APHA over in the UK. I've been considering that the populations in Ireland are different in certain ways, and also the way our fieldwork teams work is different. So my protocol has varied a little from the one that they originally established. And the work relating to sets within the environment is work that's explained by James earlier today as well. So once they have identified an area where there is a breakdown, they then identify whether the sets within that area are useful to me for my study. And those are sets which have been relatively little disturbed over their history. Then, again, as has been described previously, badgers are culled at those sets. But if those sets are involved in this protocol, they have a presentation of baits over a period of time prior to that cull. I can go through the rest of that technique later on. I'm working with a series of biomarkers here. It's not terribly important. They have a number of different names. They're all referred to as iophenoxic acid. And this little group here changes the names of them from one to another. As far as the badgers are concerned, these are the things that they see on a day-to-day basis when we go out and deliver food to them. These little baits are about the size of a €2 and probably very similar to a £2 coin in surface area. They weigh about 11 grams. They contain quite a healthy dose of the biomarker, so we shouldn't have any problem picking up even one bait eaten by a badger. The formulation of these baits is protected, but it has a lot of peanut in. Badgers are very fond of peanut, and this is effectively giving them peanut butter on their doorstep. So the nitty-gritty of this all, we present baits to the badgers over a period of 6 days. On the first 2 days, they get what we refer to as naked baits. These are simply the baits you saw previously without any wrapping, packaging. The baits are simply put into set entrances at the sets which are identified within areas that are going to be culled. And the baits are split evenly between entrances. So if we have one entrance, all the food goes down one entrance. If we have 3 entrances, then there'll be 2 baits going down each entrance. On the second 2 days, we now package the baits. This is to simulate a system in the future where if we are going to put vaccine into the environment, we need to warn the general public that what they've come across has this vaccine in, because it may be important to either track the loss of these packages or their inadvertent entry or access by non-target animals. If a dog goes down a badger hole and comes back with a pack like this, then it's important that the people who are putting out the vaccine know what's happening here. The third set of paired presentations, same packaging but using a different biomarker. And so you can see over the 6-day period, 4 of those days use one biomarker. I've simply called it biomarker 1 here. And the third pair of days gives a second biomarker. This allows us to consider how the badgers are choosing to eat the food and whether things like packaging are making a difference to them. But over the given period, 36 baits are presented to one set over a period of 6 days. That's a lot of food going in there. So if animals are eating them and we can detect one bait, we have a very good chance of finding out who's eating what. Now, I do have some results, relatively few. There's only 34 badgers that we've managed to collect data for. We've been very carefully targeting the areas that we collect these from because we want these animals at sets which are least disturbed. We have 35% of samples which are badgers collected showing positive biomarker presence in the blood serum. This is very similar to levels in the UK for periods where they have studied adult badgers alone. But in the UK they've found better uptake for cubs at a slightly different time of year to our own. Of the samples that tested positive for biomarkers, there were higher levels of the first biomarker, which was offered over 4 days, than for the second biomarker. So this probably be expected simply because there's more of it in the environment. But perhaps most interesting, there seem to be a stronger tendencies for females to test positive for the biomarker than for males. And if we examine that in a little more detail, so 42% of females of those samples had the biomarker in them, and 27% of males had the biomarker in them. But the levels within those animals were also different. So the blue bars here represent the first biomarker that was presented over the first 4 days. The red bars represent the second biomarker. And I've done a very quick t-test between these two sets of levels, and I find a significant difference between the red bars but not the blue bars. This is quite preliminary data. I'm hoping to collect some more. As the scientists always say, we need more data to give firmer conclusions. There are plans to collect that very, very soon as the next winter comes upon us. And that hopefully will give us a better perspective on some seasonality within the behaviour of the animals. One of the things that I should mention here is that the test conducted in the UK was at a different time of year. It was more late spring, early summer, and ours is much more autumn, winter time. So we do have a bias within seasonality, but we are finding relatively similar trends in those uptake numbers. This is data I've collected in Ireland. There's also some work going on in France. And in the UK at the moment, there is no information that females are any quicker to take food or any keener to take food than males. I'm sorry, I skipped over a point there on the previous line. What I was suggesting there is that the period of time that we offer food to the females is a time when they're gaining weight for preparation for winter inactivity, this winter lethargy period. So the reason perhaps we find more food eaten by the females is that they are keener to reach their target weight, because that effectively guarantees them their young, the birth and survival of their cubs in the next spring. And ultimately the idea is that we are working towards a joint group with the UK, Ireland and France, all putting together an idea for a vaccine across those 3 countries. It's still in its infancy at the moment. As you can see, the data sets that we have for Ireland are relatively small, and as far as I'm aware, France has yet to publish any information on this. Possibly, the baits need to be even more attractive than they are, but at the moment, we're very encouraged by our results. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Dan Leonard from Northwest England. It's going to sound like a bit of a daft question, but I presume if you've got like really little, very attractive baits, that the first badger that rocks up will eat them all, and then the others won't have any to come to. So I wonder whether would it make more sense to have a larger amount of bait so that it's full, in inverted commas, and then there's more left for the other badgers, if you know what I mean, so that you've got more. Does that make sense or not?
So rather than have lots of little treats, you would have one big treat?
No, several big treats.
Oh, several big treats.
Yeah, so a set's normally got between 4 and 8 badgers, people say. So if there's 6 small bite-size pieces and a badger rocks up, it's going to eat all 6, that's my point. And I'm trying to think of a way that it either can't eat all 6, or, you know what I mean, because it's a large amount or something. So it gets satiated, if you like, and then it's therefore leaves further bulky doses for other badgers.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
This is something that they have looked at in the UK, and the design that they chose overall was to use smaller baits rather than larger ones. They worked with larger ones, but I think one of the problems is what we're ultimately looking for. All the tests I'm presenting here are with dummy bait, but what you have to think about is if you want the badger to eat a bait that has the vaccine in, what size of bait can that be? And if you use a big bait, it takes a lump out of the side of it, but it doesn't get any vaccine. because the vaccine itself is considered to have maybe something like a soft centre to their little peanut treat. And if they bite a lump out of the side of a large bait, and then maybe even there's a fight over that large bait, so multiple animals start eating it, it's possible that none of them could get the vaccine dose in the end. And that's ultimately what we're aiming at. We're aiming at getting the vaccine dose into the animals.
Yep, last one, yep.
Sorry.
Yep.
Have you thought about looking at the companion animals that are within the area as well to see whether or not they might be stealing the bait from your badgers? So, I mean, if you look around the countryside, some of the terriers do run wild, and occasionally you see cats running wild and stuff like that, and if they're getting to it, or is the bait formulated, dummy bait formulated in such a way that it's not attracted to them?
Well, that's a very good point. Particularly if you were using things with meat, there would be a lot of other animals like cats and dogs that you mentioned. Also foxes would be very interested in those baits. So the fact that it's a vegetarian bait, may even be vegan, I'm not sure. But for those reasons, it's far less attractive to that group of animals. Unfortunately, pretty much any bait you put out is interesting to rats. So there's always going to be a problem with them, and something about the deployment of the baits themselves is probably the way to deal with that.
Okay, thanks so much again, David.
Thank you.